All right, so let's talk about the intended audience and the critique of the article itself. Now, the critique of the article is probably going to be the longest section, and sometimes what I have seen this round are really short um, article critiques. And I think there's also been some confusion about the reflection piece, which I'm going to try to clear up now as well. And so I apologize that I apologize for any angst that I have caused you. With the intended audience, I have really seen some improvement in that area just very quickly in the class, but also the students thinking about this really expansively. You might want to pay attention, however, to what kind of journal the article is in, right? Is it an academic journal? Is it a popular journal? If you don't know, just Google it and see, and that'll take you, 2 seconds, and you'll get some good information. So try to answer this question. Is the writer aiming the work at professionals, at students, at professors, at clergy, at nurses, at industrial workers? Who is typically the one that's going to be reading this? And sometimes there are clues for that actually in the writing itself. And this is an exercise to help us think about the information in the written text that's not always there. And we think about that certainly in my discipline when we talk about an intended audience for the Gospel of Luke, for example. And we have this guy Theophilus, but is Luke only writing for Theophilus, or is he writing for a bigger audience as well? And so we're talking about that. That's part and parcel of what we're doing here. So if the intended audience is like an academic conference, and you'll see if you choose to read it, I'm not suggesting that you would, but it's going to be there as a resource, mainly for article critique stuff. If the article is in an academic journal, like the first article for this semester came from the Journal of Biblical Literature. This is really one of the premier, I guess I should say, academic journals for the study of biblical studies, both Old and New Testaments, in the U.S., and it has international contributors as well. So that audience is going to be a highly educated audience, and yet we want clear writing at the same time, right? So that people outside the guild that may want to read what we're doing can digest that. So, but just think about it. If something's written like this article for this week was a much more popular kind of journal, well, that may impact who you think the intended audience is. So a couple of clues there. Typically, the critique section is the section that has more narrative involved with it. It's in this section wherein students, and I'm reading because this is exactly what you're going to see, wherein students balance the strengths and weaknesses so that they can tell me, your prof, right, if they are convinced by the argument. So strengths and weaknesses inform the critique, and there's always a weakness. I'm just going to say that. We've had some times where students have said, I can't find any weaknesses in this article. There are always weaknesses. Now, I don't want you to struggle with this for like 4 hours trying to find a weakness, but just know that they're there. There's always another way to look at it. And if you can't think of it right then, put that article down, come back to it the next day, and just let it ruminate in there. Don't feel like, man, I've got to get that section done. Fill out everything else maybe except the weaknesses and the critique, and then pull it all together the next day. I know that you have busy schedules. I get that. Believe me, I get that. I was a non-traditional student all the way up. I got married at 19. Sue was 21. We had children. I was 21. She was 22. And I didn't finish college until I was 25. Master's degree at 26. and PhD at 46. So believe me, I understand. I know you still have to walk through the steps, but I do understand. So, are you convinced by the argument? Do the strengths outweigh the weaknesses? Do the weaknesses outweigh the strengths? And again, this is about logic. This is about substance. It's not about surface level kinds of things. It's imperative that you say why. You really need to tell me why you're convinced by the article, by the writer, or why you're not. Why is an important question. Always think about why. And it's in this section that you may bring your own experience and learning to the equation. That's not the same as a reflection, but it is you as the reader. You have a response, right, to this article, and so don't be afraid to say, because essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, because of the world in which I live, what this writer is suggesting, I don't think it works. And here's why. So this is why I think the weaknesses outweigh the strengths. But if you say that you are convinced or you're not convinced, you have to tell me why. That's good writing. That's for anybody. That's not just for me. So a reflection, let me just say this, and then we'll do the next video on the reflection piece. That's really more of a kind of meditative piece, or you might think of it as an application piece. How am I going to use this material in my practice of nursing? That kind of thing. So one is about the article and the strengths of its, or weaknesses, and the balance thereof, of its argument. And the other is about me, how I'm going to take this and use it, or what it makes me think about. And this can be really expansive. You may start with this article and end up with how it impacts what you think about well, I have friends in Kenya, and Kenya is going through a famine in the north section of Kenya, and how maybe something in this article makes you think about what you could do for the starving in Kenya. I mean, that is really expansive, and I love to read those. And honestly, those reflections that you all are doing, I'm so impressed. I mean, I am learning a ton about you, about what makes you tick, and about the ways in which I can be a better servant to humankind in whatever part I can play in that, how I can do that better. So thank you. We'll come back in the next one and talk about that application or reflective piece.